This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Here's your host, Brandon Contes.
Alrighty, welcome to episode 108 of the Awful Announcing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Contes, and this week we were joined by one of the most recognizable voices in sports history, the legendary play-by-play announcer Verne Lundquist. And we reached out to Verne about coming on a few months ago. At that time, I don't think I even knew he was going to be in Happy Gilmore 2. If I did know, it certainly wasn't on my radar. But as we kept trying to come up with a date to record, just so happened that we landed on recording right after Happy Gilmore 2 was released. If you have not seen the movie, Verne is fantastic in it, just as he was in the first Happy Gilmore. So it was really cool to speak with him about filming those movies. We also spoke plenty about Verne's career with CBS, some of his iconic calls at the Masters and in college football. We talked about working with Gary Danielson and Jim Nantz, discussed his decision to retire from certain sports when he did, and then we speculated on the futures of Nick Saban and Tiger Woods. It was an awesome conversation with Verne. I hope we get to have him on again someday because he has so many more stories to tell. As always, make sure you rate and subscribe to this podcast. Make sure you also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page and enjoy this week's episode of the Awful Announcing Podcast with guest Verne Lundquist. All right. He has called some of the biggest games in college basketball and college football. He's also known for the Masters and yes, even Happy Gilmore. He is one of the most recognizable voices in sports history. He is Verne Lundquist. Verne, thanks so much for coming on the Awful Announcing Podcast today, where it's kind of happenstance that we're recording this just a few days after Happy Gilmore 2 came out. Like when I first reached out to you, I didn't originally expect for this to be the date that we were going to be recording, but here we are. So I feel like we have to start there. So were you eager to reprise your role on Happy Gilmore alongside Jack Beard?
Yeah, I was. I was lucky enough to be in the original back in 1996. There's an interesting story back then. My agent was the late Bob Rosen. And Bob represented all of us who did golf at CBS. And that's how he became my agent. I was told, you need to go with Bob Rosen. So he called me, and we actually did the movie in the summer of 95, and it was released in 96. And he said, they've got this part for a sports guy, announcer, and I want you to fly to Vancouver and film the role. So I did, and when they sent me the script, they had hand-delivered the script in my hotel room. I looked at the script, and in the top right-hand corner, they tried to erase the name, but it said Pat Summerall. And Summerall had turned the role down. And I often wondered, because the film, it didn't go anywhere in theaters, but then it was released on VHS. If you're old, you might not be old enough to remember VHS.
I am.
But and then USA Cable picked it up, and that's when the movie took off. So it became a favorite, and Adam Sandler became enormously popular. And one of the interesting sidelight about that is Dennis Dugan, who played the commissioner in the sequel that was just released, was actually the director of Happy Gilmore 1. And the morning that we shot, we met at 7:00 in the morning, and we shot it all at Whistler in north of Vancouver. And Dennis looked at this good-looking guy standing inside. He was Adam Sandler's suite mate at New York University Film School, and his name is Jack Jaraputo, Jack Beard in the movie. And he said, Jack, let's do an inside gag. I want you to go over to makeup and wardrobe, get a blue suit, and sit next to Verne, but you cannot say a word because you're not a member of the Screen Actors Guild. And so Jack is the one just standing handsomely nodding his head, and he's the one to whom I said, who the hell is Happy Gilmore? Well, now he's executive producer of all of Sandler's films, and he's the one, he sat with me and Post Malone in that wild setup, which is a Send Up or Live Golf.
Yeah, I was that's funny. I was going to ask if Jack Beard is as chatty off camera as he is on camera. Did you ever thank Pat Summerall for passing on the role? Did you ever discuss it with him?
Yes, I did, and he had no idea that the movie would take off.
Sure.
And the one thing I loved about it is that I got Pat Summerall money. And so, hey, life is good. Yeah. Pat was a good guy. He had some issues with alcohol abuse, and those were well documented.
Yep.
But Pat, in my view, was the most gifted counterpuncher that we've ever had in broadcasting. Without Pat, there would not have been a John Madden.
Yeah.
Because Pat had this unique ability to let John, and the producer and director of their show, both at CBS and Fox, they'd let John go anywhere. And Pat would just the right line and bring back John, it's 3rd and 10, something like that. And Madden came back. And I was lucky. I was Pat's number 2 for a long time. And in that role, when Pat was doing either PGA golf or U.S. Open tennis, I would fill in with John, and I was John's partner. I probably did 50 games over the years with John, and got to know John quite well, and knew his producer was a guy named Bob Stenner who lives in Los Angeles, and his director was Sandy Grossman, who's passed away. But those two also. The combination of Bob Stenner, Sandy Grossman, and Pat Summerall helped make Madden.
And then you also you worked with Pat on the Masters as well.
Yeah, I did. Pat, for the longest time, up until 74, was the anchor at 18 with, well, first of all, with Kenny Venturi, and mostly with Kenny Venturi, and then. My first Augusta was in 83, and I was at ABC Sports for 8 years, 74 to 80, 82, and then got the call. I got one of those calls that if it hasn't come to you, Brandon, it will someday. We're moving in a different direction. And
Sure.
The guy who told me that was a guy named Chuck Howard. He was the executive producer under Rune Arledge at ABC, and he called me in and said, "We're going to let you go." And fortunately, I had a friend who had been at ABC and went to CBS, and it's a long, complicated story. But I had an opportunity at CBS that I really was never given at ABC, and among the most delightful phone calls I've ever received in my life was in December. When I got a call from the director of personnel in New York, and she said, our executive producer of golf, Frank Chirkinian, wants to know if you've ever done golf. And I said, I did probably 10 at ABC. And they said, good, you're on. And Frank called me, and he said, here are your assignments: Pebble Beach, Jack's Tournament Memorial, Byron Nelson Colonial, and oh yes, you're working Augusta. And he said, because Augusta is such a high-profile event, I don't want you to go in not knowing our guys. So I would like for you to work the Phoenix Open the week before Pebble Beach, because it's on opposite the Super Bowl, and so nobody's going to be watching the golf. And you can meet our announce team. And so my wife Nancy and I showed up. We didn't do cable in those days, and we showed up on Thursday, and I was introduced to Frank. And when we went on the air on that Saturday, holy cow, there was Summerall and Venturi in 18. The late Ben Wright was working with the late Tom Weisskopf at 17. I was at 16. Steve Melnick was at 15. And I looked at Nancy and I said, because she was in the tower with me, I said, we are in the big leagues. And indeed, that association, the move to CBS was, the best thing that ever happened to me. And then doing golf with that crew as long as I did. And then the biggest event I ever got to call, ultimately, it turned out, was the Southeast Conference. And we as CBS took what essentially, in my view, was a regional sport, and we dared to put it on as a national telecast. Now, the fact that you had Alabama and Auburn and Georgia and Florida and Ole Miss, that kind of helped. I mean, it was the best quality in college football. But we did a national broadcast every week, and I only had two partners in the 17 years, Todd Blackledge for 6 and Gary Danielson for the last 11.
All those years at CBS calling golf, 40 years at the Masters. Do people ever recognize you solely for Happy Gilmore?
Yep. Yeah. Two things. I was in Dallas at the ABC affiliate for 17 years. And I did a game show. It's a long story called Bowling for Dollars. And it was a franchise show, and it appeared in different markets around the country. In Boston, it was called Candle Pins for Cash. And but in Dallas, I used to get this, "Hey, ain't you the guy on Bowling for Dollars?" I used to get that all the time. And then mercifully, Happy Gilmore came out. But by then, I'd moved on because that was in '96.
Yeah.
And I had left Dallas. But you know what's going to happen now, because I understand that this is already the number one movie released on Netflix, and the reaction I've heard from half the Western world about having watched this thing. And my wife and I, we watched it Friday night in this large group, and then last night, because there was so much commotion, Nancy and I sat down here in our living room and watched it again. And I got to tell you, I laughed. And when I'm dating myself here, I just turned 85, and they told me I was going to work with this former rap star who is now a country western singer, and my reaction was, "Who the hell is Post Malone?" I didn't know. He was one of the nicest, kindest guys. He's only 29. He lives with his daughter in Grapevine, Texas. He's got more tattoos than I've ever seen on a human being in my life, but he was so kind and so nice. And we were laughing. We're very blessed. We've got a lady who's lived with us for 30 years here in Steamboat. Because of the lifestyle, we had to have a caretaker, and she's a divorced gal. She just walked out just a minute ago. And Josie said, you don't know who Post Malone is? I said, no. And he kept trying. He's so nice, but he kept trying to sneak an F word in. And Sandler said, Post. His real name is Austin.
Yeah.
And she said, Adam said, "We're going for a PG rating here. That ain't okay." But this, like I said, I have heard from so many people around the country, and just calling. I just saw you in Happy Gilmore too. So,
I think the "Who the hell is Happy Gilmore?" like that's probably the most famous line from the first movie.
Yeah.
With Happy Gilmore 2, I think it's going to be you saying "gangster shit" indeed with that perfect stare into the camera after.
There's a member of the House of Representatives from Austin, Texas, named Chip Roy, and he's a friend, and we have a condo in downtown Austin. We spend about 3-4 months of the year down there. And Chip sent me a text last night. He said, "Gangster shit." And I'd forgotten about the line until we watched it last night, and I laughed. I mean, it is a pretty funny line.
Yeah.
Sandler, by the way, is one of the kindest, nicest people I've ever been around.
Yeah.
There's no essence of a superstar at all. At all.
Very cool. Yeah. No, I thought the movie was fun. Like as somebody that watched Happy Gilmore so many times as a kid, I thought the sequel is what you would expect and what you kind of hope for from an Adam Sandler comedy. Like it's not
Yeah.
supposed to be an Oscar nominee. I think the the comedy hits, and it
Yeah.
was it was really a good second film.
Yeah, I agree.
Did calling golf again in Happy Gilmore 2, did it make you want to get back behind the mic for CBS?
Not really. My boss was Sean McManus, and he was Jim McKay's adopted son, and Jim McKay was one of my idols, and Sean became my boss. Jim McKay's real name was Jim McManus. That's a long story, but he became maybe the best storyteller we've ever had in broadcasting, and I idolized Jim. But Sean took over the reins. I don't know, 1996, something like that, and he called me in 2023, and 2022, and he said, you're coming up on 40 years at Augusta, and this will be your 25th year at the 16th hole. What would you think about stepping aside? And I had 2 years to prepare for it, Brendan, and I was ready. I mean, what you read about short-term memory loss in an aging human being is quite true, and it's kind of hard to screw up the names if you only got two guys, but anecdotally, and this is a true story. I was doing a speech in Dallas last March, and I've got a set number of routines. I use a lot of video and anecdotal stories, and suddenly, as a group of Texas Cantor Fitzgerald people, I'm up there, and I used to be able to spin this up with no notes. I could do 45 minutes like waking up, but all of a sudden in the middle of it, I couldn't remember whether I had told an anecdote or I still had to tell the anecdote. And it was frightening. So I've decided no more public speaking. It's just to have been able to do it well for so long. I didn't want to. Now, a podcast like this is a piece of cake because you're asking questions and I could still remember the answers, which is very helpful. But to be in front of it, I had a 19-year career, side career, where I spoke on cruise ships, and it was all anecdotal and video, and I used to be able to do that with no notes at all. Well, boy, now I got that little thing right in front of me. I'll guarantee you. And it's just I'm not uncomfortable with it. It's just a reality.
Yeah. Well, I'll say 15 minutes into this podcast or so, 85 years old, you still sound pretty sharp to me. So it's impressive. So was it harder to walk away from, say, college football in 2016, the NCAA tournament 2018, or the Masters last year? Like, did you, every time you stepped away from one of those things, were you on board and felt you were ready to step away from those?
I probably would have liked to have a couple more years at SEC.
Okay.
Just if I look back at it.
Yeah.
But hey, 17 years in the greatest conference in college football. That was sufficient. Ironically, I did my last basketball regional tournament at Madison Square Garden. Well, what better way to go out? And yeah. I worked with Jim Spanarkel. I had a 15-year relationship doing basketball with Bill Raftery. And of all the sports that I've done, 20 in all, over the 60 plus years of my career, Billy is the closest friend I've ever developed. We're still in touch. We talk at least once a month. And a quick story about the way network television works. Raft and I were were first paired in 1983 in Columbia, South Carolina. We did a much anticipated intersectional game between the University of Idaho Vandals and the South Carolina Gamecocks. I mean, America was breathless for that one, right? But a week later, we were back there for a highly anticipated event between Marquette and South Carolina. And Marquette had this junior All-American guard named Doc Rivers. And so Bill and I had gotten along so well the first week. He said, hey, we're back here in a week. I'll bring Joni, his wife. You bring Nancy, and I'll just bet we become good friends. We did, and we did. And then he got a call from New York, the fellow named Kevin O'Malley, saying, gosh, you guys sounded great. I got a call later that afternoon, Kevin O'Malley, boy, you and Raph sounded great. Can't wait to hear you again. 17 years. 17 from 83 until 2000. We never worked together. And so that's why when I did the Leitner game, the Duke Kentucky game, still regarded by many as the greatest college game ever played, I was working with Lenny Elmore. And then in 2000, they put us back together. And then Raft and I worked together till for 15 years until he got bumped up. And he and Ian Eagle and Grant Hill, they're just magnificent, I think. Ian Eagle, by the way, is in my top 5 of all-time sports broadcasters.
Yeah.
Play-by-play guys.
Yeah, tremendous.
Yeah.
So after stepping away last year, how was getting to watch the Masters this year, just as a fan?
I was fine. I was really okay because because of that 2-year period, Brandon, I've been given by Sean. Now, we decided this year not to go back just because I wasn't sure who they were going to put at 16. I know who I wanted them to put at 16. They did. Frank Novello is a fabulous guy, and I think with an understated sense of humor. And I'm still close to all those guys, to Jim and Trevor, and to Dottie Pepper. They put us in private homes during the week of Augusta, and for the last 5 years, Nancy and I shared a home with Dottie Pepper and her husband David, and Billy Kratzert was the third announcer in the room with us. Dottie she's just a fabulous human being. So, and I watched. It's going to be very emotional next week, this week, when Ian Baker Finch says goodbye. He and I are close. Finchy and I shared the Grand Slam of golf, first in Kauai and then in Bermuda for probably 10 years. And he is another very gifted broadcaster, a wonderful guy. He and his wife, Jenny, have 2 daughters. He's from Brisbane, Australia. They live in Florida now. But I was surprised that he's only 65. And he said, that's enough. No, I pray to God it's not health related.
Yeah.
But I know that Jim was at Minneapolis or Blaine, Minnesota because of IBF last week.
Yeah.
That's not a tournament Jim, usually Andrew Catalan does that. But so I'll be glued to the set. And I don't doubt we'll sit back over here and I'll shed a tear for Finchy.
Sure.
Yeah. Wish him all the best.
What obviously some of the most iconic calls, like you think Jack's putt, Tiger's chip in. Do you think are you able to look at those and say that they were, or admit that they were made more iconic because your calls were so beloved? Like when I think of the 2005 Masters, I hear your voice just as much as I see Tiger.
Yeah. I'd be less than candid if I didn't say I'm pretty proud of that one. There is a backstory, and I'd love to share it with you. Uh, the way the front of a production truck is set up, the producer is to the far left. The director who calls the shots is in the middle. In this case, it was Lance Barrow to the left and Steve Milton in the middle. And to the right is Norm Patterson. He's the technical director. And in this case, Steve is looking at 54 monitors in front of him. And not for example, this was true. My camera guy in the 16th tower was a fellow named Bob Wishney, who's retired now. And on Wednesday, we used to go out there during the part 3, and Wish and I would just sit there and kind of get back into the mood of the week. And he said, look, I've got this brand new camera. They put them each on the main camera on the second 9. It's got a 1,000 to wood booms, 1,000 to 1 zoom lens, which means we can zoom in, and it's got a horizontal stabilizer. So it means if you get excited and jump up, which you always do, the camera won't shake and I won't get yelled at. So that's Bob and me in the tower. And so Steve, as Chip, and Tiger was playing with Chip, Chris DeMarco. So he pulls an 8-iron long and left. And Lanny Watkins was our 18-hole announcer at the time. And DeMarco was 20 feet below the hole. And I said, Lanny, what do you think here? And he said, he'll be lucky to keep it inside DeMarco's ball. So now, here, take camera 10. That's Bob. Tiger hits the chip. He zooms in. The ball takes a sharp angle down. And as it nears the hole, with all my eloquence, I yelled, "Oh, wow." And then as it hits on the lip of the cup, Steve Milton says to Norm Patterson, take 6. Well, 6 is over here, and it's on a platform, Skip Shackelford, and his responsibility is to get a reaction shot of Tiger. Well, Norm Patterson instinctively followed his gut and did not take 6. So he stayed with the shot. And because he did, I said what I said. You saw it in real time. Had he taken 6, you'd have heard the roar, but you would never have seen it. So Norm Patterson is the real hero of that whole sequence of events, and he really put his career on the line to do that.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. If we didn't get to see the ball actually drop in, that's a totally different call and shot for sure. So you in that moment, then you have the oh my goodness in your life. Have you ever seen anything like that? That's obviously not a call that can be thought of about prior or scripted. Like it has to happen in the moment. Have there been other calls? Like, were you ever an announcer that tried to pre-plan or script anything for the broadcast? Those types of calls? Or were you always able to just trust your instincts?
It's a reactive craft. You've got to react to what's going on in front of you. Now, I do know some guys who will force fit something in, and by golly, this is a brilliant line. I'm gonna use it. That kind of stuff. But no, I never have. I've always trusted my instincts. Now, I'll say this about Tiger's call. I was 65 years old, and had I been 35 without a lot of experience, I might have totally called it differently. I might have been screaming at the top of my lungs. But I had, a lot of experience by then. And so, and silence is the most overlooked talent that a broadcaster can bring. Just shut up. Just shut up. I don't want to hear you talk at this time. I'll skip sideways here for a minute. I was lucky to do 3 Winter Olympics figure skating with Scott Hamilton. And the first one was in Albertville, France. And prior to that, we had one practice event at the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs. And then in 1990, as a build-up to the Olympics, we did the European Figure Skating Championships in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. And so Scott knew I didn't know Scott about his sport. And so here we are in the second city of Russia, and we're doing the Europeans. And Scott knew I didn't know squat about his sport. So we worked out a system. And if you go to practice, you get what they call a jump sheet. Skate, 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 triple jump. Skate, 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 double axel. Skate, 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 triple loop. I still can't tell one from the other. And he knew that. He knew that. So if something significant was going to happen, he would reach over with his right hand and put his right hand on my right forearm. And I knew what that meant. Just shut up. And I did. And we got through 3 Olympics that way, including the much publicized Tanya Nancy thing in 94.
I don't know, like the being able to trust your instincts have really made some of your great calls. I don't know how common that is. Like Jim Nantz has famously admitted that he scripts some of his calls. I think he said even the a win for the ages with Tiger's first Masters, he had said that he had thought about that ahead of time. So if you do have time to give a call some thought, is that something that an announcer should take advantage of?
I just, okay, you brought up Jim, okay? So, and we're dear friends. I want to punctuate this with that right now.
Yeah, dear friend, different style.
Yeah, yes. My all-time groaner from Mr. Nance came when UConn was winning a national championship, and they had a wonderfully gifted player named Emeka Okafor.
Yeah.
Emeka Okafor, okay? So Jim, they win the NCAAs, and Jim goes off the air by saying, "You must admit that UConn is a mecca for basketball." And I'm that he hit the wall with that one, and he knows that I tell that story. So listen, Jim Nantz is the greatest golf host we've ever had, and I so admire his ability. And here's what makes him great. When all the rest of us, the Saturday, for example, the day's done, we're heading back to the houses at Augusta the day before. Jim will stick around, and he will go out to the practice range, or driving range, or practice putting surface, and he'll hang it out, and he'll talk to the guys, the players or caddies. And then on Sunday afternoon, he's got such great discipline. He waits until the exact right moment, and he'll tell you something about that guy. And you go, gosh, I didn't know that. He's brilliant at it. Yeah. And he does it week after week after week. And that's hard work and discipline to know when to tell the anecdote.
Are there rivalries between announcers? Like, were you and Nance competitive with each other?
So.
No,
I don't think so. At Augusta, for example, I worked every hole except 18, and I was more than happy with that. And Jim has different skill set that I had. Would I have loved to have called a Super Bowl? I think so. Yeah, I didn't get to. Would I have loved to have been in the 18th hour at Augusta? Yeah, but it wasn't in the cards. Do you think I'm going to look back and say, boy, I had a crappy career? No, not at all. No, I've never been envious. Thank God I'm not. I think Jim is terrific. I think our whole golf crew is, Nick Faldo brought a different sense of analysis to 18 than Trevor Immelman does. But Lanny Watkins, Kenny Venturi, each of them has their own style, and they've all contributed, I think. But thank God I have never been swallowed up with envy. I just hey, I'm a preacher's kid who started out as a radio FM disc jockey in 1963. And to go from when FM didn't mean anything, I promise you, and to go from that to have had the career and done the number of sports that I've done, hey, I'll put my head on the pillow and smile.
How did you get started in broadcasting? How did you become that radio disc jockey? And was the goal at that time to become a sportscaster?
No, not at all. Not at all. I'll try to give you the clip. I'm the son of a Lutheran minister, and my dad was ordained in the Lutheran School of Theology in Rock Island, Illinois. He took his orals on D-Day in 1944. And his first church was in Everett, Washington. And then his second church in 1952, from the time I was 4 till I was 12, we lived in Everett. It's 30 miles north of Seattle. And they took a church in Austin. So I call Austin my hometown. It's just easier than going through the rest of it. So I graduated from Austin High School in 1958 and had a chance to stay at home at the University of Texas. But quite frankly, I wanted to get away from home at 18. And so I went, because I was a Lutheran, and I went to Texas Lutheran College then, now Texas Lutheran University. And I majored in sociology with a minor in history. And all that does is qualify you to fill out blue books. I had no idea what to do, no earthly idea. So I thought, well, I grew up in a minister's home. Maybe I'll give the ministry a shot. I had some way in the future idea of combining my belief in religion with radio television. So I enrolled in the Lutheran School of Theology in Rock Island and landed a nighttime job at WOC across the Mississippi in Davenport, Iowa. So I worked from 9 to midnight and then got up and helped with the kitchen crew. But I knew 6 weeks in, Brandon, I didn't have what it takes. I didn't know, no way. But I was determined to finish out the year. In the meantime, I called back to my hometown of Austin, and I was able to convince the program director to hire me for the summer as an FM disc jockey. So the summer of 63, and I do have somewhere on microfilm, there are records of me having 18 hours of credits at the Lutheran School of Theology, including 6 hours of Greek, which has never been particularly helpful. But during that summer, and I was, working 7 to midnight, something like that, the sports job opened up, and I had this interest in broadcasting. I was a public address announcer in high school and college at football and basketball games. I was never a good athlete, but I knew that early on. And so my compensation was to write about it or talk about it. And when the sports job opened up, I asked for and was given an audition, and they put me on the air. Initially as a weekend guy, and I did a Monday through Friday AM disc jockey show, and then filled on. I was 23, living with my mom and dad, and so I was there for 3 years. Went to San Antonio for a year, went to Dallas in '67, and was in Dallas for 16 years at the ABC affiliate. And the life-altering event was when I got a call from the general manager, Tex Schramm. And he invited me to join the Cowboy Radio Network as a pregame, postgame announcer. And then Bill Mercer, the late Bill Mercer, he passed away about 4 months ago at the age of 99. Wonderful announcer. So I started as pre and post, moved up to game color announcer. I wouldn't call it an analyst. And then Billy wanted to do Major League Baseball. And so when the Rangers became the Rangers, the Senators moved from Washington, Bill Mercer took that job, and that opened up the play-by-play position. And Tex Schramm, knowing I'd never done play-by-play, had the guts to put me on the air. And my first ever play-by-play job was 51 years ago, the Cowboys against the College All-Stars. And boy, was I a nervous Nelly. Holy cow. But he had faith in me, and I was able to pull it off. And that assignment led to everything else. Everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it's amazing. I mean, thank God the minister thing didn't work out, because I think you ended up having a bigger impact on the world as a sportscaster than you would have as a minister.
No kidding. Yeah.
So how did calling games at the beginning of your career compare to calling them later? Like, did the increase of information and technology change the way you called the game?
No, because I was too old fashioned. I still, I'm 85 years old. I don't do social media. I thought I've gotten this far with it. And I understand the influence of it, the impact of it. I get that, but I'm just too stubborn. I'm Scandinavian, half Swede, half Norwegian. Ugh. So,
what announcers did you grow up kind of listening to and model yourself after?
Two come immediately to mind, and young people will not have heard of either one of them. The legendary Ray Scott was one. Ray did the Green Bay Packers, and Ray was the minimalist of all minimalists. He did Green Bay in Super Bowl I and Super Bowl II. He also was the play-by-play guy for the Ice Bowl, and I was president of the Ice Bowl in '67 as the pregame, postgame guy. But Ray Scott, here's a typical Ray Scott touchdown call: star, Dowler, touchdown. It's television. Let the cameras work. It's television. And the other was sadly a guy that is not remembered as much as he should be. His name was Frank Gleber, and Frank died. He became a mentor to me. He was in Dallas for a long time, and he also worked CBS. And Frank was at the 17th hole when Tom Watson took the lead in '77. We lost Frank in 1985 to a heart attack at the age of 51. But Frank could do anything. And I knew him well enough, and he's a dear friend. And I said, what's the key? He said, learn the rules of the sport, learn the jargon of the sport, and then watch a lot of videotape and borrow liberally. Don't be ashamed to learn from others whom you admire who've done it well. Excuse me. And I did that. I followed Frank's lead. And Frank also he spoke, his eloquence was silence, just like Ray Scott. They didn't overtalk the thing. And as I mentioned a while ago, I would have called Tiger's chip differently had it been 35 instead of 65. Well, but I learned so many lessons from Frank and Ray Scott.
Did you well, you mentioned earlier that you would have liked to call a Super Bowl. When you were at CBS, did you or the network ever want to put you on NFL games? Did you ever?
Yeah, I did NFL. I sure did. I went to CBS in '82, and I worked the first 2 years of college football. And then I got a call that really was life-altering. A fellow from CBS called me, and he said, this guy from the Pittsburgh Steelers is going to retire, and we're going to hire him, and you're going to be his partner. So that's when I met Terry Bradshaw. And here's how life changes when you've got a superstar like that. The event announcing our partnership was held at the 21 Club in New York. And I thought, holy cow, this this is really the big leagues. And Terry and I bonded immediately. We're as different as two people possibly could be, but we remain dear friends. So Terry and I were the 7th out of 7 announced teams. Summerall and Madden were number 1, and we're down here at number 7, deservedly so. And we were doing a lot of games they call point to point. Well, we were together in 84 and 85. The powers that be said, we're going to split you up. So Terry went off and worked 2 years with Tim Ryan. I worked with, Pat Hayden and Dick Vermeil were my partners. And then they put us back together in 88, and magically we had improved, because now all of a sudden we're number 2 behind John and Pat. And it was amazing. And so we got to do a playoff bowl that first year. It was the much publicized Fog Bowl in Philadelphia and Chicago, December 31st, 1989. And we were together in 89 and 90. And we were doing a preseason game in Gothenburg, Sweden. Somebody had the great idea that Chicago Bears with a big Scandinavian population and the Minnesota Vikings with a huge would play a game in Gothenburg. Well, maybe 19,000 showed up, and they didn't care. They cheered whenever anybody put a foot. They loved the punters and the place runnings. No, it didn't matter. Excuse me. Anyway, Nancy and I and Terry and his then wife Charlotte were having dinner together, and Terry did not get along with his coach, and he didn't get along with his teammates. And he said, "Bubba, I think I might be elected to the Hall of Fame." I said, "You think? 4 Super Bowls, you got a shot." And he said, "Well, I would like to have Art Rooney introduce me in Canton, but he's in bad health." He said, "I'd love to have my dad introduce me, but I don't want to put that kind of public pressure on him. I don't get along with any of my teammates." He didn't. He said, "Bubba, it might be you." And I said, "Terry, I'd be honored, but if it is me, you know people in Pittsburgh are going to come down hard on you." He said, "I'm ready for that." So in August of 1989, we were in Canton, and I introduced Terry to the Hall of Fame. And I know this from experience because I was there. We were up till 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and he didn't. I'm writing my notes. I've got it scripted. I've memorized it, and he's going to wing it. And so we had to ride in a parade together the next morning with 3 hours sleep. And then I get up there, and I remember Al Davis was sitting right behind me, and Pete Rozelle was. I've got a picture of my office upstairs, and then Terry got up with all these Pittsburgh fans there, and his immortal line was, "What I wouldn't give to put my hands under Mike Webster's butt just one more time." The place went crazy. And Brandon, I do a fundraiser for my alma mater every year. We're doing one. Texas Lutheran is located in Seguin, Texas, about 30 miles from San Antonio. And because of the people with whom I've done, we call this front row. And I've had Charles Barkley and Archie Griffin and Roger Clemens. Archie Manning is what I meant to say. And I've had Terry twice. And I've had Staubach. Bradshaw knocks it out of the park. He's so uninhibited, as you may have seen on Fox pregame.
Yeah.
Might. But Terry, at the end of the 90 season, 89 season, he said, "Bubba," and he knew as long as John Madden was there, he was never going to be number 1.
Yeah.
It's driving him nuts. So he said, "I'm going to talk to the front office," and he left, played game announcing, and joined Greg Gumbel in the studio. They were fabulous together. And then when Fox got the NFL, Terry joined the Westward Movement, and he commutes now. He lives just this side of the Red River in Texas, and we're in touch quite often. Not every week, anything like that, but I love the guy. I worried about him because he had bladder cancer, and I know you heard that Deion Sanders just was operated on, and Godspeed to him.
Yeah.
But anyway, Terry, just talking to you makes me think I got to call that son of a gun. Get back in touch.
When did you stop doing NFL?
In 2000.
2000.
Yeah. I was, there's another story there. Nancy and I were here, and I started, Pat Hayden was doing NFL games. Notre Dame games with Dick Enberg, who was a wonderful guy, Dick was, and a great Hall of Famer. And Pat called me and he said, I keep hearing rumors that Enberg is unhappy. He was kind of second to Bob Costas, and it was driving Dick nuts. And he said, you might watch out. And then Lance Barrow, our golf producer, came back from meetings at Augusta, and he was also my football producer in the NFL. And he called me and said, I keep hearing rumors about Dick Enberg. So I finally picked the phone, called Sean McManus, and I said, Sean, is there there's Dick Enberg stuff. There's no way it would ever affect me, is there? He said, no. He said, I've heard the rumors too. He said, Dick Enberg's such a high cost guy. He said, I don't think we could ever afford him, on and on and on and on. And he said, now, in the unlikely event that we were to hire Dick Enberg, how would you feel about going to the Southeast Conference? And I said the appropriate things, and I hung up the phone and looked at Nancy, and I said, honey, pack your bags for Tuscaloosa. And that's what happened. And my first was Todd Blackledge, as I told you, was my partner. And my first game ever was Florida at Tennessee. And I had never been to Neyland Stadium. And pardon me for that's
fine.
Very, anyhow, I hope my wife will get it, but it's a call from out of area, by the way. All of you want to know that. Anyway, it'll quit in a minute. So my first game ever was Florida at Tennessee, and it came down to a last second pass from Jesse Palmer.
Hello, this is your steamboat
Saying City Market Pharmacy, trying to let you know your prescription is ready for pickup. All of you know now. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I thought Nancy would pick it up. Thank you for calling City Market Pharmacy. Well, I won't tell you what the prescription is for, but because I can't remember.
That's all right.
From the phone number where you received
Thank you. Quit.
Thank you for choosing City Market.
Well, you're welcome. I'm sorry for this.
No problem.
Jesse Palmer hit Jabbar Gaffney with a touchdown that may or may not have been a legal catch. Anyway, it was ruled it was. So now we're 107,000 people there, and we go off the air. And I looked at Todd. I was breathless. And I said, Todd, are they all like this? He said, enough of them. But I worked with Todd for 6, Gary for 11, and we had what a run of sideline reporters we had. Our first was Jill Arrington, who's retired now, and then we had Tracy Wolfson, and then Allie LaForce. So have I been blessed? And I've lost touch of Jill. I know she married and lives in L.A., but Tracy and Allie and I, Nancy, we're all still very, very close. Tracy she's just a wonderful lady. And Allie, I'm probably closer to than any of them. She and her wife, Joe. Joe was a major league pitcher. He was a closer, 13 years in the majors, and they live in rural Ohio. And she, of course, TNT lost the NBA this year.
Yeah.
But Allie called me and she said, I'm staying where I am. So I guess TNT will offer enough opportunity.
Yeah, other sports.
Yeah. She and Joe have a son, Jacob, and then they're expecting their second child in October. So they're both quality people. So's Allie. So's Tracy.
How was work at Gary Danielson? Obviously, he announced that he's going to retire after the upcoming college football season. How was working with Gary?
Gary, well, I'm about to. This is about to become show and tell. Gary and I were such disparate personalities, and he's a little tight and he's wound a little tighter than I am, and so we're doing a game at Alabama and Bryant Denny, and the old video television press box was two-tiered, and Gary allowed himself to be interviewed by a columnist for the Birmingham News, and he's down on the first. He's over in the corner with these notes, and I was shocked to see that he was over there, and I'm up in the second tier, and every radio personality, every SID that was in the press box, every scout, they came by, and my work's done. I'm not going to get anything more done 3 hours before the game than if it's not in the barn by then, it ain't going to get put in there. So Gary was quoted in this article as saying, look at him back there, glad handing with that. He said, I would no sooner do that than put an ice pick in my eye. So when I retired, it was quoted, right? So when I retired, we were doing a dinner at Bones Restaurant in Atlanta, and there were various gifts given, and this is the one that I got from Gary Danielson. And it says, Verne Gary, here we are. Verne Gary, 2006, 2016. Anyway, I keep that right here.
The ice pick.
Yeah. But Gary is as well prepared as anybody I have ever worked with whom I've ever worked. And I think he's a great analyst.
You, well, I'll ask the kick six. You spoke a little bit about earlier, just like the ability to, when you're calling a game on TV, let the TV do the work, let the camera do the work, and let the game breathe. But like you listen to that call and watch that play, and you just accompanied it so perfectly, and the way that your excitement built throughout, without going over the top, I think was tremendous. But how proud are you of that call?
Very, I really am. And again, Brandon, I think it goes back to experience. I equated, that was 2013. I equated, it's in the same canoe with the Tiger call. Had I been 35 years old, I would have called it, I think, a lot. I would have screamed.
Yeah.
But I had the discipline to keep it level. And I do remember, because I've seen that so often, it gets replayed. It's still the greatest college game I've ever seen. And Chris Davis during and famously among those from whom I heard in the Happy Gilmore 2 aftermath was Matt Austin, who was the referee. And if you remember now, TJ Yeldon stepped out of bounds for Alabama with either the game clock expired or 1 second left. And they took 7 minutes for the replay. And they were trying to coordinate our main game camera with the end zone camera to synchronize so they could definitively say, this is when he stepped down. And Matt Austin came on, and after 7 minutes, and Craig Silver, our producer, kept saying, guys, keep talking, keep filling. Well, hell, we told the same stories And we looked at the replay over and over and over. And finally, Matt Austin said, please put 1 second back on the clock. Well, Saban was so irritated with his senior place kicker who had missed. It was 1 of 4 and had Kate Foster, and he had 1 block. They put a redshirt freshman, Polish immigrant on the field to try a 57-yarder. We thought he'd go for a Hail Mary, but he kicked it, and Chris Davis was 9 yards back and returned it. And again, I think years of experience affected how I called it. And I do know this, when he went in the end zone and scored, I said, and answered prayer. And then I looked back and I said, no flags. And I thought, dear God, don't let there be any flags. And the relief was, now, my favorite part of the whole thing was the replay. We showed 3 replays, and we waited a good 5 minutes for Steve Milton, the aforementioned Steve Milton, to conduct a visual symphony: wide shot, tight shot, close shot, reaction shot, and he was brilliant at it. And then I said, well, you might want to see that again, and keep in mind that the field goal block team was on field. So on the 3rd replay, here comes Chris Davis, and as he goes in the end zone, Gary's line was brilliant. He said, well, no wonder they couldn't tackle it. They had nothing but fat guys on the field.
And credit Gary for in the moment, like knowing when to lay out as well. Like a lot of analysts would have instinctively jumped that call just because of how exciting it was, and it was something that we've never really seen before.
Yeah, it's all discipline, you know. It is just shut up. I go back to Scott Hamilton. Just be quiet, lay out.
You mentioned
by the way,
go ahead.
One quick one, Brandon, on laying out. When Rory won the Masters, Jim Nantz and Trevor Immelman did the greatest job of laying out I've ever heard. They went 6+ minutes.
Yeah.
Never. It was brilliant. And also when Tiger won in 2019, Faldo and Jim went 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Not a word. And I mean, that's why we got 65 technicians there. And so anyway.
You mentioned earlier, you were talking about working with Raftery and how he's a friend. So many, it seems like everybody that has worked with Raftery talks about what he's like after the games.
Yeah. What
was spending time with Bill like when the games were over?
Adventurous. He never met a last call he would observe. I'm looking back right over here. I've got a picture of Bill and me doing a game. I love Bill Raftery, and I love Joni, his wife, and his whole family. He's got 4 kids, 3 daughters and a son, Billy. And whenever on the rarer occasions now, when we get back to New York City, we always make time for dinner.
Yeah.
And but Billy will he'll bend an elbow with you.
Did it what was it like when CBS decided to split you guys up? Did that bother either of you at all?
I think so. Well, when I was doing the NBA, I worked with Billy Cunningham, and the kangaroo kid from North Carolina, who Billy lives with his wife Sondra in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and we were having some kind of a meeting that involved both Pat Hayden and Billy Cunningham, and they said, you know what, Lundquist, you're like an Otis escalator. We go on board with you and then we ride to the top. And I appreciated the sentiment. And again, I don't have an envious bone. I really don't. But there are reasons that Bill Raftery is doing the best games in college basketball. and their reasons Iron Eagle is, and I think both of them have helped Grant Hill and elevate his analysis. And but Raft is the most charming bon vivant. I mean, and he can tell stories. Oh my gosh! So that's another occasion where I follow Scott's advice: just shut up and listen to Bill. And Bill will go till 2 or 3 in the morning. Hey.
You mentioned doing the NBA. You know, what's funny, growing up, I most associated you with the video game NBA Live 98.
Wow.
I played that game so much as a kid. So I can't tell you how many times I heard you say hello and welcome to the game. I'm Verne Lundquist while
Holy
playing NBA
cow!
Live 98.
Wow, that was arduous doing that thing because you had to do so many repetitive to fit all the scenarios. Yeah, I'm trying. I think we did that. We did the voiceover in Seattle. I think EA Sports, wasn't it?
Yep, EA Sports. Yeah.
Yeah. Holy catfish.
And you live in Colorado now? That's your home
Nancy and I live in Steamboat Springs. She was a voice major at the University of Texas, and I grew up in Austin, and we met when I was working at the ABC affiliate in Dallas, and then in '80 I learned to ski here in Steamboat when I was 31 years old, and I learned to ski with Billy Kidd, who's still a legendary skier, and he lives here. Billy taught me to ski, and then I was working in Dallas, and I came back here in '75 to play in a charity golf tournament, and it was in June of '75, and I thought, holy cow, what a place this is. If I can ever pull this off. So Nance and I both been married before, and so with my former wife, I bought an A-frame, a little simple 2-story building. And when we divorced in '80, I bought her out. And so I owned that when Nancy and I met, and then we married in '82. And I convinced her that I was going to take her out of a nice lifestyle in Dallas and move her to the mountains. And I can promise you, my phone is about to go off. Shut up. And we've had enough with that phone. Anyway, I convinced Nance to move up here, and we moved here in the summer of '84. So we've been in Steamboat now 41 years, and we moved into the home in which we're living now in 1990. So it's a beautiful community. Geographically, if you go north to south, we're 40 miles from the Wyoming border.
Okay.
A 6-hour drive west of Salt Lake City. But geographically, it's Steamboat, Vail, Aspen, Telluride. And it's on what they call the Western Slope. We're about a 3.5-hour drive from downtown Denver.
Okay.
So, Brandon, we're heading back. We have a condo in downtown Austin. And we'll head back there early October, and we'll be there until early November. Then we come back up here always for Christmas.
Yeah.
And and you'll notice we're in Colorado in the summer.
Yeah.
we ain't in Austin.
Yeah. What do you think of the job that Deion Sanders has done with Colorado?
I think he's obviously a gifted coach. He's, in all candor, he's a little bit too much for me, the flamboyant personality. He might be the greatest. He or Bo Jackson's the greatest athletes this country's ever produced. 2 of the greatest. I mean, Jim Thorpe, Bo Jackson, Deion Sanders. How do you pick? I mean, but the flamboyance is not my particular cup of tea. But and I love, I'm worried about him with this bladder cancer treatment.
Sure.
I noticed that one of the things he said, trying to make light of it all, he said, I don't pee the way I used to pee. And but and we were just talking earlier this morning. Uh, he's bringing an awareness to this dreadful disease, and good for him for doing that. But he obviously can coach. Obviously,
Yeah.
If you want to talk NIL transfer portal, which drove Saban out of the coaches, by the way. Shadur Sanders was driving a Rolls Royce around Boulder, Colorado. Life has changed since I was a kid.
Do you think Saban will return to coaching?
I personally don't, but I know that the reported offer now is in the NFL with Cleveland, and I was so blessed during the years of SEC broadcasts that we did dozens of games in Tuscaloosa, and I got to know Nick really well. I call him friend. I know there's a supposed boundary, but and I saw the side of Saban that he's now allowing himself to show on game day.
Yeah.
That's the Nick Saban that I knew, and not the Nick Saban who would be so dismissive, particularly of the local press. Nick has a side of him that he's giving to. I'll tell you a funny story. My first ever telecast, was for ABC, Ohio University at Kent State in 1974. And years later, I realized that there had been this graduate assistant for Kent State on Don James' staff named Nick Saban. He was waiting for Terry, his wife, to graduate so they could get married. And his original intention was to go back to Fairmont, West Virginia, and run his dad's gas station. But he got hooked on coaching while he was a GA, and obviously he never went back to coaching. And he never ran the gas station. But he and Miss Terry, as he calls her, they've been married 50 some years. But Nick is. I got to know that side of him, which but now one of the calls I got from Happy Gilmore, ironically, is another of my friends, Tom Izzo, head coach, basketball coach, Michigan State, and he knows Nick. Tom Izzo is the one who told me that Nick was getting out because of NIL.
Yeah.
And Nick and Tom and I talked 2 nights ago, and he said, boy, I don't know. No NIL, no transfer portal. He might be tempted. So he's 73, I believe. I don't know how many more mountains he wants to climb, and he's so darn gifted at what he's doing. Talk about a mix, he and McAfee, huh?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Did you ever think that he might have an interest in going back to the NFL? Like, did he feel like he left, with the way it ended with the Dolphins, that he still had more that he wanted to accomplish there?
If Wayne Huizenga had let him trade for Drew Brees, he never would have left the Dolphins, I don't think.
Yeah.
But Huizenga, they thought Drew Brees was damaged property. And so I know Gary and I were with Mal Moore, the athletic director at Alabama. And we used to do these gatherings on Thursday or Friday nights when we get to Tuscaloosa. And Mal sat Gary and me at the end of the table at this buffet dinner, and he said, "Let me tell you the story about how I got him back." And the whole story is the G5 that went to Miami, and Miss Terry telling Mal Moore, "Do not leave this house without us in the back seat under blankets in that car." And it's an amazing story. But I think had Nick been able to get Drew Brees, he might have stayed in Miami. But that brought him back, and he belongs in college football.
Yeah.
I mean, take your pick: Bear Bryant, Nick Saban. Who's the greatest? I don't know. That's a close call.
Can Arch Manning be enough? If, say, Arch Manning is in Cleveland or Arch Manning is in New Orleans, do you think that could be enough to lure Saban back?
Well, let's see what Arch Manning does first. And I personally have no doubt that he's going to be a monumental success at Texas.
Yeah.
The guy's so gifted. But gosh, I just don't know.
And then the last thing while we're talking about comebacks, Tiger Woods is going to be 50 in December, coming off the Achilles surgery. Does Tiger come back to the PGA Tour?
No, I can't see it. I just can't, Brendan. He's gone through so much, both personally of his own volition and physically. I mean, he's lucky to be alive after that car crash. And when I did my last Masters, I had 3 goals. I wanted to thank Jack Nicklaus for what he'd meant to my career. I wanted to thank Tiger for what he'd meant professionally. And I wanted to meet Scotty Scheffler. I'd never met him. 1 off, 2 off, 3. I got to know them all. You got to do them all. So, Vinny, I'm ready to walk away.
How does Scotty Scheffler today compare to Tiger in say 2000?
He's in the same paragraph, isn't he? I think he is. I mean, he's 29? I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
And he's won 4 majors already. I go back to Jack and his prescient comments about Tiger when Tiger's stated goal was to win more than 20 or 18, whatever, however you count them. And Jack said, you never know. You just never know. Injury, family issues, you don't give it to him yet. And so, but I think Scotty, if he stays healthy, he's got a shot. He's that good.
Verne, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Brandon, is very, very, very enjoyable. And best of luck to you.
Thank you. That is Verne Lundquist. I'm Brandon Contes. This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast. Please also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page. But regardless of how you consume Awful Announcing and the Awful Announcing Podcast, thanks for listening and be good.
Thanks for listening to the Awful Announcing Podcast. For the latest news spanning the sports media landscape and more, check out awfulannouncing.com and follow us at Awful Announcing.